Well, it is very dangerous to overreact to anything in week one as it relates to specific teams, right? I think we can all agree on that generally, even if the Twitter sphere is not always going to follow through with that. But I do think narratives can stick, especially when you are the Big 12, especially when you are the ACC. You are not a power two school. You are trying to make sure that you still have whatever seat at the table you can still have. And in that respect, I would tell you that week one was not the greatest thing in the world. Week one was not the greatest thing in the world for the Big 12 or the ACC. And you may sit here and say, John, the Big 12 went 14-2. The Big 12 did not have any of those embarrassing losses that we talked about to like last year when it was Rice and it was Texas State and it was South Alabama by 26 points. There was none of that. In fact, we had a nice little chat with all these schools. I did my little pep talk here. Hey, Colorado, like, how about, let's not mess around and lose at home to North Dakota State. Oklahoma State, that's going to be a tough one with South Dakota State. They've won 29 in a row and 2 national championships. Let's not go losing that game. They didn't. That did not happen. None of that happened. So in that respect, it was good. But I told you, the biggest game of the Big 12 season basically was on Saturday. And it was Big Noon Saturday. It was West Virginia and Penn State. And that did not go well. It did not go well for anybody that was wearing blue and gold. It did not go well for anybody that is a Big 12 fan hoping to carry the banner of the league. It did not go well for anybody who called Drew Aller the 8th best quarterback in the Big 12, which would be me. That did not come out looking very good at all. So that part is really important. I think it weighs very heavily on the minds of a lot of people here. There was an opportunity cost that was really lost by the Big 12 on Saturday, even while avoiding disaster. So I'm not here to gloom and doom the entire outlook of the season, but I am here to be realistic today and say that for both the Big 12 and the ACC, there are some narrative problems that are going to exist here. And for the Big 12, that's all going to center around West Virginia and what happened against Penn State. Also, by the way, your other opportunity to get a big out-of-conference win was going to be Florida, UCF at Florida. Did we watch what happened to the Florida Gators on Saturday? They got absolutely walloped by Miami, and they're about to play the hardest schedule basically in college football history. So don't think that you're going to get a whole lot of credit for that one. On the ACC side of things, Miami is a saving grace there, and that is fair to mention because the Canes have a really manageable schedule the rest of the way, and they did go look incredibly impressive with Cam Ward in demolishing Florida in the swamp. But outside of that, we're talking about a league, even with Florida State and Clemson here, that now has withstood Florida State taking an upset loss in Ireland that the entire country watched in week 0 because we were starving for football by the time that came on. Clemson got absolutely manhandled on Saturday by Georgia. It was, to shout out the guys at the Solid Verbal, a crock-potting if I have ever seen one. Not even close. And the narratives on Dabo. You want to talk about narratives. Dabo is dealing with narratives more than anybody right now. And then dark horse playoff contender Virginia Tech, who was really hyped up, really hyped up throughout a lot of the season, or the offseason rather. They go out and lose to Vandy. So the ACC is going to have a narrative problem on its hands as well. We're going to talk about this throughout the show today, quite obviously. There's another game that I think definitely has an effect on this entire conversation, because a lot of this is, we're talking about reputation, not just long-term and more in the abstract, but also in, can you get 2 teams into the playoff, the ACC or the Big 12? Can you get 2 teams into the playoff? That's the real tangible effect of this in the near term. And that outlook, I would say, is not looking nearly as good after everything that happened here, because even though the ACC still has that saving grace in Miami, if Miami just waltzes to the ACC title, which if you're going to overreact to week 1 is what you would say it appears that they are going to do, then it's not going to help the ACC at all. Good luck getting one of those other teams in. If Virginia Tech actually does have a nice season the rest of the way, that Vandy loss is going to stick with them. that will absolutely stick with them the rest of the way. That is the point. And now with Notre Dame off to a nice start and getting one of its toughest games out of the way by winning in College Station, Notre Dame is likely to be taking up one of those at-large spots in the playoff as well. It's all part of the conversation. We'll go more in depth on everything that happened in the Big 12. If you are new here, I am from Big 12 country, so you'll get a little bit more of that perspective. But we're talking about everything in college football and how it affects the big picture here on this channel. If you are a Big 12 fan, make sure that you're subscribing to my Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business, ofbnews.com to get signed up for that. Or you can click the link in the description of this video. Again, ofbnews.com to get signed up for the Big 12 newsletter. It will make you the smartest Big 12 fan in your group chat, and it will bypass any Big 10 or SEC bias, any of that nonsense that you don't need. You'll get your college football news filtered for a Big 12 fan at ofbnews.com. So make sure and get signed up for that. If you guys are new here as well, let me explain how this works. There is a chat going. We have plenty of people weighing in on Twitter. You won't be a part of the actual live chat that is on YouTube. If you want to do that, go on over to John Kurtz on YouTube, and you can hop in there. Everybody else, keep the comments coming. I appreciate all of you guys who do that. If you would like the video, I would appreciate that as well. That helps me with the YouTube algorithm. But also, if you want to guarantee that you make it on the show tonight, guarantee that your question or comment makes it on the show tonight, you can do so by clicking the $ below the chat box, attach a donation to your chat. It will make it a super chat and pin it in a separate column for me, and that will ensure that it makes it on the show tonight. So that is how you can do that. And if you are watching, not live, but after the fact, Venmo is another way to do that. It's John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you would like to contribute that way. And if you do, I will kick off the next show with your comment. And I have one of those to get to in just a moment. In fact, here it is from Brian. So, Brian, I appreciate you weighing in, my friend. Thank you for being here tonight. Brian on Venmo says, no Yukon. So he's referring back to what we talked a lot about last week, within the last week or two, Yukon to the Big 12 being very much on the table. Not sure that I'd say likely, but it's on the table. Brian says, no Yukon. Hurley will be offered more money each year. He wins and he is gone. Gino is going to retire sometime, and if Mora does keep winning at Yukon, he'll be offered more money and gone. 2031, both gone if football bad. All right, so my general take on Yukon, just real quick here, and I know some segment of the audience is rolling their eyes. It's not the segment that drives the views because, again, I see the viewership numbers, and realignment drives everything. But I understand. Guys, we're going to talk pretty much all football tonight. I'll address this, though, real quick. In a nutshell, my take on Yukon is the reports right now are that football wouldn't come until 2031. They would have to hit financial benchmarks along the way to even get there. And in the meantime, you would take on the rest of the sports, including men's and women's basketball. So to me, it feels like a rental on the prestige of Yukon basketball, and you're going to force their football program to get its act in order if they're actually going to be able to come. Plus, in 2031, that's when there's a lot of speculation we'd be heading to a Super League because the TV contracts will all be up. So will it even matter? Will we have a Big 12 at that point? That seems like a good deal to me, but I understand all the pushback on Yukon football. Brian is not in. Interesting comment there on Hurley. You might be right. My take on Hurley was, well, he just turned down the Lakers, so I feel like there's a pretty good chance he's going to stick around. But I can understand you saying that. The counter to that would just be Yukon has won national championships under multiple different head coaches. Jim Calhoun, Kevin Ollie, Dan Hurley now with a couple back-to-back. Like, Yukon's proven that they're more than just one coach. This is not Gonzaga. Like, I understand that fear with Gonzaga and Mark Few, what happens when he retires. I don't think you need to worry about that nearly as much with Yukon. So that would be my pushback there. I mean, with the women's basketball program and Gino, maybe that's another discussion there. I would think they would still be able to handpick whoever the best coach on the market is going to be. Reasonable points, Brian, and I appreciate you weighing in. But I do think there are some counters there to what you are saying. But I appreciate you, man. Thank you for being here. There are a couple comments I wanted to highlight here, just that I saw right out of the chute. Since you guys were basically the first in here, I will highlight these. Yet he goes, John Slandered time. It is John Slandered time because I was only 1 minute late. Okay. So not enough to necessitate a John Standard Time reference, I feel. All right. But fair enough, Yeti. That did make me laugh. John Slandered Time. And Antoine, are you the same guy that was in my Twitter mentions talking about Arizona State earlier? Look, I don't hate Arizona State at all. Arizona State had a hell of a performance on Saturday. That was easily the best game of the Kenny Dillingham era. And I mean, I know it's Wyoming, but look, ask Texas Tech about Wyoming. They lost in Laramie last year in the non-conference at this time of year. So to just blitzkrieg them the way that they did with Levitt looking pretty good at quarterback, man, I mean, great performance. Defense scored a couple of times and scored. This to me was like the stat that was so emblematic of Arizona State and where they were at on Saturday versus where they were at last year. It took them into the fourth game to get their first turnover on defense last year. They got a pick six 41 seconds into the game on Saturday. Yeah, it looks like Arizona State is definitely not finishing last. No, I've got respect for Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State and what they're doing there. I really like Dillingham as a guy, and I definitely liked him as a coach 2 years ago when they hired him. I was a little more skeptical after last year, but I'm open to them being much better. By the way, I thought Cincinnati with Brendan Sorsby throwing it all over the place looked like they're a team that probably won't finish last in this league. Baylor was better. BYU was better. I think all the teams that were picked at the bottom of the league had more impressive performances than you would have thought on Saturday. Arizona State being chief among them. The tweet that I got earlier, if you are the same guy, you may not be, but the tweet I got earlier was like in response to me saying that Oklahoma State and Utah looked a cut above the rest of the league on Saturday with the way that they played. I mean, I'm not putting Arizona State in the tier 1 category with Oklahoma State and Utah. And Utah, I noted not that, look, Southern Utah, say what you will. Utah already had the reputation of being the Big 12 favorite. They are, to me, the team that I picked second in the Big 12. And they went out, scored touchdowns on their first 5 drives, got Cam Rising 5 touchdowns, and just completely dominated. So to me, you had the rep. You went out and played a really impressive game. You're tier 1. Oklahoma State played one of the tougher opponents in the league in South Dakota State, who had won 29 straight and back-to-back FCS titles. And they completely controlled that game. Alan Bowman looked really good. That was a really impressive performance, which puts them in tier 1 category for me there. So it's nothing against Arizona State. They definitely deserve mention. And that's a part of why I bring this up here on the show. But I'm not ready to put them in Utah, Oklahoma State category. That does not mean I hate them, though. So don't hate Arizona State. I do not hate Arizona State at all. But as you guys can see there, if you want to make sure that your question or comment makes it on the show, really typically complaining about me hating your team is not going to do it. But Arizona State, I wanted to give them a little bit of love, so I did it there. There is one way you can guarantee it, though, if you want me to talk about your squad or whoever it might be, or you just want to support the channel, and I couldn't do it without all of you guys who do. Click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. If you really want to support the channel, the other thing you can do definitely is subscribe to the Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. All right, so I mentioned this off the top. Look, like teams and their seasons, we don't need to be overreacting to that. West Virginia's season is not done because they got handled by Penn State on Saturday. It's not done. But the narrative of the Big 12 trying to gain much ground nationally this year might be done because of the way that game happened. The fact that it was a loss and that it wasn't close, and you have to fight so hard for just a shred of attention these days if you are the Big 12 or the ACC. And this was one of those rare opportunities where there was a lot of attention. And credit West Virginia for doing a really good job in bringing that attention on the game. They got Pat McAfee there. They utilized a very popular alum with a national show and a national platform. He showed up. West Virginia fans showed out. Wonderful atmosphere, wonderful environment. And then on Saturday, man, they were just outclassed. I mean, I hate to admit it. I am not. Penn State has driven me nuts for years doing the, go out and beat the teams that are like 40 through 70. If you were to power rank 1 through the end of FBS football. The Big Ten has so many teams that are between like 40 and 70 or 40 and 80. Penn State beats all those teams. They lose to Ohio State and Michigan, and then they go to a Rose Bowl or go to a Peach Bowl, whatever it might be, and call it good at like 10-2. And it drives me nuts. And I wanted very badly to see that exposed, but that is not what happened at all. West Virginia was outclassed in the game. Season not over. Not a great look for the league. Generated a lot of attention on Friday to cut through some of the noise on Saturday. Big noon kickoff was there. You cut through some of the noise, got some level of attention on it, and then you get thumped. It goes into a weather delay, so people just kind of tune out anyways. It bleeds into the 2:30 slate of games, 2:30 Central, 3:30 Eastern, and nobody's really paying much attention. They just know, well, West Virginia got thumped there. Last thing they saw was West Virginia give up a touchdown drive in under a minute at the very end of the half. Now, was there offensive pass interference on that drive? Maybe so. But I would just say the unfortunate piece of this is if you are a West Virginia fan, I don't know that I saw much that would tell me, even if a couple of those calls went the other way, the outcome was coming even close to changing. So that's the part that really sucks. And that I think will stick with the league. You had a chance to generate some real positive attention when you got eyeballs onto that scene there. And West Virginia, there had been a lot of hype about Garrett Green and them being a legitimate contender, and Neil Breezy shirts, like a really good PR job this offseason. Honestly, I would say by West Virginia football to do all that you can to actually get eyeballs on there, an opportunity the Big 12 rarely gets. It didn't go well. And that's not great. Opportunity cost lost there for the Big 12. West Virginia's season, not totally lost. Opportunity cost lost, or just an opportunity cost for the Big 12 in not getting that game, or at least making it entertaining, compelling. It was really none of those things at all. Now, the rest of the league has avoided at least a part of what plagued them last year. I rattled through the other day the list of awful losses that the league had: Texas State, South Alabama, Rice. There were a bunch of them last season. Didn't happen this week. Did not happen this week. So that is good, but that will not matter nearly as much as what could have been gained by winning this game. Like, you would trade a Colorado loss to North Dakota State for West Virginia beating Penn State, I would say. Maybe Colorado's a bad example because that's another one where people were watching. People do watch Colorado, and that had a spotlight being on the Thursday night of the season opening. But, Oklahoma State, South Dakota State, right? You might have traded that for the sake of the league and just what the reputation would be. I think of, in just trying to describe to you the impact of this, this is a little sophomoric of me, but I think of one of my favorite movies, Superbad, when Seth, played by Jonah Hill, is talking. I'm trying to remember exactly what he says to the kid. It was like a kid who had like peed his pants or something in grade school, and he just yells at him, "People don't forget." I mean, people don't forget. People across the country that are very power to biased here do not forget about things like what happened to West Virginia. In the ACC, Clemson, I'm not a huge Dabo defender by any stretch of the imagination. I respect the guy. He's won a couple of national championships during the peak of Nick Saban's powers. You have to respect him for that. But this narrative that the game has passed him by and not utilizing the portal, and I don't even know if like all of it's the portal because they still recruit pretty well and they're high in the 24/7 talent composite, but they have lost the ability to generate an offense. Georgia's really good. Maybe Cade Klubnik will turn it around, but this is one where I do formulate some real judgments on Clemson based on this, because it's just been years now where they have not had an offense, and they have not had anything that lets you think that they can compete for even what it takes to make the playoff this year, which would just be an ACC championship. I mean, they got thrashed by Georgia. Suffocated really is probably the better word, just completely suffocated. And it feels like the same Clemson, and the Dabo jokes are flowing. And, it kind of feels old school in a way where at one point in time, 5-10 years ago, we had the term Clemsoning. I guess more like 10 years ago, we had the term Clemsoning, right? Which is kind of just botching a game late. And Dabo took them out of that, and Clemsoning all of a sudden became winning national championships. It feels like we're fading back into that territory. And this is where I go back to narratives, man. I mean, narratives forming around this. It's being formed around Clemson. They are one of the flagship carriers of the ACC. So that will start to hurt the league reputation. Everybody already got their shots in at Florida State. This is kind of a lesson in realignment, right? The two schools that are suing their conference and trying to get out, and they think that they're better and they deserve more money. They've had a pretty wretched start to the year. It's been a pretty wretched start to the year for both of those two, and they are the ones having to carry the banner of the league. Now, Florida State did lose to Georgia Tech. I guess if you wanted to say, well, John, the ACC fans that are really like, we'll be fine even without Florida State or Clemson. We're still better than the Big 12, all that stuff. I mean, okay. I guess it's good. Congratulations to Georgia Tech. I don't think anybody still is viewing Georgia Tech as something that's going to carry the brand value of either one of those two schools when they leave, or even the football prowess. But okay, it is better than if you were losing to, I don't know, Vanderbilt. The problem there being that Virginia Tech, dark horse playoff contender, people really hyping them up. And look, I love Josh Pate. I feel like he was one that was driving that Virginia Tech bandwagon more than just about anybody this offseason. Not a great look to come right out and go lay an egg at Vandy and lose there. Fall way behind, furiously come back, but it winds up coming short. They lose at Vandy. They could very well battle back into the playoff picture, but nobody nationally is going to have that much respect for Virginia Tech there. And when you start adding those things up, Florida State, Clemson, the two flag bearers, and then you've got Virginia Tech, who took a decent amount of offseason hype. They do this to Vandy, last place team in the SEC. Not great for anybody that hates the SEC and the SEC superiority complex that is out there, by the way. Miami, yes. Miami, impressive. Now everybody will view Miami as the prohibitive favorite in the ACC, but they are taking a lot of reputational damage toward trying to get a second team into the playoff. Now, at the same time, could you argue, hey, the Big Ten looked awful on Saturday, and maybe, thinking about a fourth or fifth Big Ten team into the playoff instead of a second team from the Big 12 or ACC is kind of unfair? Yeah, I might agree with you on that. You guys know how I feel about the Big Ten. And the Big Ten's big boys did not look good. Did not look good on Saturday. Oregon, I'm sitting at the K-State press conference after the game on Saturday, literally glued to my laptop watching Oregon duke it out with Idaho in the fourth quarter on Big Ten Network, by the way. Just weird vibes all around on that one. But yes, that is something that was happening. I was watching Oregon duke it out in the fourth quarter and hang on for dear life against Idaho. Michigan, 30-10, looks a little bit better. They had a pick six at the very end of the game. They were in a dogfight, 6-point game in the fourth quarter at home against Fresno State. Not good. Not good. Not good. Ohio State pulled away from Akron. My guy, Will Howard, the stat line at the end looked nice, but it took them a little while. They were sleepwalking for a good chunk of that game. So the Big Ten was not ultra impressive either. But the problem is Big Ten's got that reputational advantage. People will give them a pass, and they didn't actually lose any of those games, right? They didn't actually take the L's for any of their big squads there too. So I wanted to throw that out as a little caveat. Like, hey, I understand, guys. The Big Ten drives me insane. SEC, I am fine to bow at the altar of the SEC. The Big Ten is much more frustrating to do that most of the time. But they didn't actually lose games. ACC's been losing games. Big 12 lost a big game on Saturday with West Virginia and Penn State. Okay, let's get to a couple of super chats here before I tell you about another game nationally that means a lot. Obviously, just at large to the country, but also if you are a Big 12 or ACC fan thinking about what are things going to look like long-term for your league, very much affects that too. Let's say hello first to Eddie. Eddie, I appreciate you, man. Thank you for being here. If you need a real estate agent in San Antonio, you know where to look. Eddie Lozano, San Antonio Real Estate. Appreciate you, my friend. Eddie says, hi, buddy. Talking Big 12 football is good. Indeed, it is good. You know what? In fact, cheers to that. Cheers to actually talking some football. Utah looked good. TCU looked good as well. Needs to play with discipline. They do. Yeah. TCU, not the most disciplined performance, but it was pretty gritty to come away with a win there in a back and forth affair at Stanford. Arizona worried about the defense. Indeed. But boy, that offense. Whew, that offense. Same with Texas Tech. Yeah, no defense from Texas Tech. Only bad team is Houston. The others need work. Yeah, if we want to totally overreact to week one, I mean, it would definitely be everybody picked down at the bottom of the Big 12 besides Houston looked better than you'd expect and put together an encouraging performance. And now Houston, you feel like, is definitely in the cellar of the league. I would caution you against writing them completely off because I do think Willie Fritz is a very good coach. There's a lot that needs to be done there with that rebuild. UNLV is, I mean, they won 9 games last year, I believe, right? They played Kansas. I can double check that. UNLV was a bowl team, at least last year. Barry Odom is a guy that's been an SEC head coach before. Like, that's not just some rinky-dink operation that they lost to. So I would caution you against that. But yes, if you want to overreact, they did win 9 games. They were 9-4 in the regular season last year, or 9-4 rather after their conference championship game. So I agree with most of these takes. I thought Utah looked great. Cam Rising looked great. That's a tremendous sign for Utah. If you read in the Open for Business newsletter, ofbnews.com, to sign up for that, my 10 things that will define the Big 12 season, 10 questions that will define the Big 12 season. Number 1 was, will Cam Rising and Jalen Daniels stay healthy? All good on that front for both of them. Jalen Daniels, I thought, had a little bit of rust. One miscommunication with a receiver that turned into a pick. But it's hard to take much from when you play 1/2 against Lindenwood, who just moved up to FCS. Utah was pretty dominant. Didn't seem like there was a lot of rust there from what I saw on Cam Rising. TCU, they needed to get that win. Josh Hoover threw for over 300 yards again. He does, man. Quarterback in the league that we're probably not talking about enough is Josh Hoover. And I know TCU had sloppiness all the way around. And, you know, Sonny Dykes said a lot of times what we did is going to get you beat. Helps when you're playing Stanford in front of about 15 people in a tree. And that's what they were on Friday night. But still, Josh Hoover can sling it. And he's got some real talent. And TCU has a pretty talented roster, top 5 roster in the talent composite. Number 2, I believe, in the 24/7 talent composite in the league. So TCU, don't sleep on them too much. But with all the other stuff that was going on, I did feel like, yeah, I mean, that looks like a 6-6, 7-5 kind of TCU team out there. Arizona, I mean, Teteroa McMillan's stat line was just obscene. Noah Fafita's too, but it's a little more staggering when you see it coming from a receiver. And I think he is definitively one of the top 3 in the Big 12 or in the country. 2 of the top 3, I would profess to you, are in the Big 12 between Travis Hunter and Teteroa McMillan. Luther Burden would probably be the only one I would throw out there, but McMillan had 10 catches for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. Obscene. That's 30.4 yards per catch, man. 30.4 yards per catch. Fafita was 19 of 31 for 422 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. Now, you gave up almost 500 yards of offense to New Mexico, and New Mexico scored 39 points. So that is a bit disconcerting. We'll see how much of a concern that's going to be long-term for Arizona, but they do appear to be as advertised on offense, which is electric. They are electric. Texas Tech, boy, and Eddie, I appreciate it, man. Texas Tech felt like they had that game rather in control, even though they were still allowing a decent amount of offense from Abilene Christian, but that script got flipped. And Abilene Christian just kept their foot on the gas. And that came down to the final play in overtime, 2-point conversion. Texas Tech makes one nice play, one kind of clunky play there from Abilene Christian to win the game, which is huge. I will emphasize that is huge. And this is what I would preach to Tech fans. One, for the sake of the league, just to not have that in the loss column, not be one of those that shows up on the list that I had tweeted last year that the Big 12 put together, this awful list of gross non-conference losses. It will not It will not be there. It is a 1 in the win column. Last year, Texas Tech started 1-3, lost a heartbreaker at Wyoming, clunky one early in the year. This time you didn't. I heard Joey McGuire make this same point in his post-game interview right after the game on the field with ESPN. Didn't lose that. Everything is still in front of you. You're fine. That's the good news. You can still go accomplish an awful lot this season, and clearly there is room to grow, and week one overreactions can really burn you sometimes. However, that Texas Tech team certainly on Saturday gave off a lot of vibes of most of the Texas Tech teams that we have seen since 2009 and since Mike Leach walked out the door. Very 6-6, 7-5 kind of vibes coming off of that Texas Tech team. I would say anywhere from 5-7 to 7-5, which has been kind of the Texas Tech wheelhouse, basically like the anti-TCU wheelhouse, where they're either worse or way better. Texas Tech lives in that middle area, and that definitely smelled a lot like it based on what we saw on Saturday. And I know Tech fans, like the narrative there and the story there is I know how badly that fan base is just thirsting for more, thirsting to get over that hump. I didn't see a lot that gave me a lot of encouragement on that front necessarily on Saturday. Baron Morton, nice game, and he is the guy that I've questioned. I wonder about the ceiling there. So, I mean, he put up some huge numbers. But, yeah, there's a lot to be concerned with there on the defensive side of the ball. But at least I will say, don't go too crazy jumping off the ledge just based on week one. Mark, what's up, Mark? I appreciate you, Mark. Thank you for being here. Mark says it's always a good week when BYU and Utah both win. All right, Mark, the rare fan rooting for both here on this channel. Utah and BYU both win. And shout out to Jake Retzloff. Speaking of quarterbacks with impressive week one performances, he won the job. His offensive coordinator said before they had announced who it was that was going to be starting that there was a clear-cut number one. I think we saw why on Saturday. Retzloff with a really, really impressive performance. And I know that was kind of cathartic for BYU fans because it was the first time that they had topped 500 yards of offense since 2022. I mean, it was objectively their best offensive game since joining the Big 12. So that is important for a BYU team that needs to be much better there. Encouraging, definitely encouraging. I think if you are a Cougar fan, I mean, the competition level is going to ramp up a lot from Southern Illinois, which is a solid FCS program, certainly. But the competition level will ramp up a lot. Will that continue to go with it? We'll see. But it's a great step in week one for BYU. And you've already heard me talk about Utah there. So, Mark, thank you for weighing in. Appreciate you, my friend. And yes, congratulations to both of your local squads, BYU and Utah there. Alan, what's up, Alan? Appreciate you, Alan. Thank you for being here. Alan says, John, 14-2 does mean something. 14-2 being the Big 12's record in week one. Jayhawks look good, but didn't play anyone. KU season starts next week. Yeah, that is really what I would say about Kansas. Like, I mean, the KU K-State Twitter discourse, I probably should not bring up as any kind of like serious entity here because it's ridiculous going back and forth and like watching the Avery Johnson versus Jalen Daniels. K-State fans tweeting the Jalen Daniels interception and people arguing over whose fault it was. And, Jalen Daniels didn't have a super impressive stat line. Neither did Avery Johnson necessarily. None of the guys, it was week one. They both played FCS teams, but especially for Kansas, like the starters only played a half because they were playing a team that just moved up to FCS recently. You can't take anything from that. I really don't know that there's much at all that you can take from KU playing that Lindenwood game, which, as I understand, was scheduled from Lance Leipold at the beginning of his tenure when he first got there, when you're trying to schedule out some wins and rebuild a program and all that. And they've obviously been ahead of the curve on that front. And so the game wound up probably not being honestly as helpful as maybe it could have been. So you're right. Schedule really does start next week. And I saw Circa had that as a 3-point line, KU -3 at Illinois. I hope Circa, can that be FanDuel? I've seen it like -6 other places, which I guess, gives me a little bit more pause. But if I can get, I don't even bet on games, but if I can get KU -3 at Illinois, I mean, that seems like bet the mortgage on it. Like Illinois is dreadful. I do not foresee Kansas having any problem there. Notre Dame and former Duke quarterback looked like college football playoff finalists. Sunflower Showdown coming. Rock Chalk Jayhawk. Allen. Well, thank you, Alan, for weighing in. I appreciate seeing you here as always. Was definitely interested in your thoughts on the Jayhawks. As for Notre Dame, that is a good one. I'm going to hold off on that for just 1 second, Alan, because that's going to roll into the next big point that I'm going to make on the show here. So pause 1 second on that. McMuffin on Baylor Bears right now. Well, hey, nice performance from Baylor. I got to be honest, that is maybe the one game in the Big 12 that I have not had a chance to dive into all that much, but saw the score, saw it was a dominant performance for Baylor. How did maybe you can tell me in the chat? I will look at it here in a second, McMuffin. But how did Daquan Finn look? How did Finn look for Baylor? I was trying to get around to every single game today. I got to most of them. Did not see a ton about what happened in the 45-3 win over Tarleton. 14 of 22, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks for Daquan Finn in the season opening win. But 28-0 at half. So yeah, Baylor jumped in front very early on that one. And that's, again, a part of the bigger picture here. I would say it was a storyline that had developed is that the bottom of the league, Sans Houston, really showed out and gave their fan bases some hope. And Baylor certainly included in that. Kenneth, what's up, Kenneth? Kenneth says Texas Tech looked bad on defense. To Abilene Christian's credit, they had 18 Power 4 transfers that started, 6 on offense. Former Texas Tech players, they did. Yeah, right. The quarterback was a former Texas Tech Red Raider. So there's a bit of an inherent advantage in that. Lost best offense or outside linebacker for the season, best DB out. Okay, so some reason for hope again. I was trying to give Texas Tech fans a little bit of a reason for hope because I was just looking at the Twitter instant reaction after the game last night, and it was not very positive at all, which I understand. Believe me, I've seen plenty of fan base meltdown, and that was pretty meltdown worthy. I would say that's a really frustrating one for Tech, but the season is far from over. But I guess I would also say this. I feel like it happens every offseason, even last offseason, a bit when I picked Texas Tech actually to win the league. But most off seasons, it feels like Texas Tech fans will find a point where I get a little bit sideways. People get a little frustrated. This year it was, well, John, you rattled off 8 teams you think could win the Big 12, and Texas Tech wasn't one of them. Why not? We have XYZ transfer that came in, and Joey's recruiting class is ranked this, and we have Micah Hudson and all this stuff. And my response was merely, one, yes, if I'm talking about specifically this team, like Baron Morton is a concern of mine as far as the ceiling of the team goes. But 2, I've heard you guys say it before, and it's been since 2009 that you won 9 games. So I got to see it. It's the same premise at this point as for a while there before Kansas's streak had been broken in basketball. I was like, hey, if I'm going to pick somebody to win the Big 12, why would I pick anybody but Kansas? Someone else needs to prove it. I need to see it before I can actually stake my name to it. And Texas Tech, unfortunately, is at the same point here with taking the next step. I got to see them do it before I actually would do it. And this is what, that performance week 1, it feels very much like what Texas Tech teams have been for the last 2 decades, decade and a half. I'll be fair there. Decade and a half. So anyway, that's where I'm at on that. Alan brought up Notre Dame, right? The Notre Dame game, 23-13 over Texas A&M in College Station. One of the biggest games of the day. You could argue it was the biggest. It was probably marginally more entertaining than Clemson, Georgia, which would have been the other really big one that people were talking about. Florida, Miami also in there. That was the best game. At least there was some offense to really watch in that game. This was a slugfest. This was a rock fight. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. And even though it was a totally, totally ugly game, nobody generated really any offense until the third quarter when finally Notre Dame got into the end zone. It's a huge win. It's a huge win for the Fighting Irish. Nobody will remember or care how ugly that was. Notre Dame now has firmly entrenched itself into the college football playoff at large discussion, which goes back to the top of the show and what I was talking about there. Massive opportunity cost if you're the Big 12 and West Virginia goes out and gets thumped the way that they did by Penn State. Now you've got Notre Dame entering the discussion where they will probably be a firm player here in getting an at-large spot into the college football playoff the rest of the year. And it's not just because everyone's going to be so awed by this win over Texas A&M, right? That is not at all what I'm saying. Texas A&M is probably, speaking of teams that smelled pretty 7-5-y, that's the vibe that I got from that. I think Texas A&M is pretty average, certainly by SEC standards, pretty average. It's not that's going to carry Notre Dame. It is what I'm about to show you that is going to carry Notre Dame the rest of the year and make it more difficult for the Big 12 or the ACC, who have had their struggles in big moments. It's going to make it more difficult for them to get a second team into the college football playoff. My apologies for the ad there. This is it. Here is the rest of Notre Dame's schedule, my friends. Northern Illinois, at Purdue. Good old Power 2 Purdue. Miami, Ohio. Louisville. Now, Louisville was salty last year. Maybe the Cardinals can be a bit of a test, but that's at home. Stanford at home. At Georgia Tech. We did see Georgia Tech beat Florida State, so fair enough. Maybe. Navy, Florida State. It's in South Bend, Virginia, Army, at USC. I don't know what exactly is happening in the USC game right now. Maybe that would change some people's opinions right now, being swayed early on. But that schedule is not murderer's row, is the point here on Notre Dame. And you got to keep in mind that it's not just, oh, look at these games, like they're going to be favored in every single game the rest of the way. But it's also, they could drop one or two of those and still very much be in the discussion. They got this win. They got over the hump, one of their more difficult games of the year, to start out the year in front of 100,000 fans in College Station. We make fun of them. They are very annoying sometimes on social media, at least, but they show out, and that's a really tough place to play. And it was number one toughest places to play on the video game for a reason. Notre Dame just cleared a huge hurdle, and you know what Notre Dame's got working for it. They've got big time brand equity, great brand value that's going to carry the day in a lot of discussions, I'm sure, in those rooms, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. And now if you're trying to compare a Big 12 that lost its one chance to go beat one of the top contenders in the Big 10, it's not likely to hold up very well if Notre Dame is going to stay on this track that it appears that they are going to be headed on now after beating Texas A&M. That is a bummer. Same for the ACC. If we're talking about Virginia Tech at the end of the year, if they do turn it around, you're talking about a Virginia Tech team that's 9-1 late in the year versus 9-1 Notre Dame. Well, Virginia Tech lost to Vandy, disqualified. It's going to be a disqualifier in a lot of people's minds, especially when Notre Dame already has the brand advantage there. So toughest game left. If you're going through, I like Kelly Ford's ratings a lot. If you're going through Kelly Ford's ratings, Notre Dame's toughest game left is Florida State. That's their number 19 in the country there, and that game's at home. They will, as I mentioned, have the latitude to drop a game or two. So even if they were to lose that game, very much still in play that they could get one of those at-large spots. So I like some of the hilarity that ensues when Texas A&M loses in a big spot like that, and I would say it wrong. Is it Schadenfreude or Schadenfreude, whatever that German word is? That means like you're taking pleasure in somebody else's pain. I get it. There's a lot there with Texas A&M because they can be an obnoxious online fan base, but it would have been better for Big 12 and ACC fans had Notre Dame actually lost that game and Texas A&M won. I see a couple reactions to it here. BR James, how about Elko trashing CK7? That would be Colin Klein. I assume that means the shot that the cameras picked up of him saying, tell him to run the bleeping ball, I believe is what it was. He said it a couple of times. I will just put it this way from what I saw of the game. Colin Klein can't throw the football for Connor Wegman. I'm sure there are things Colin Klein could have done better, but Wegman just didn't look like he had it. He doesn't look like that dude at quarterback for A&M. So that seems to be the bigger issue and the bigger problem for me, from my perspective, than Cullen Klein as a play caller. But who knows? Elko's not there to mess around, so I'm sure they will try to get whatever fixed and figured out. I don't expect this to be like the Jimbo Fisher era at Texas A&M. I do anticipate that it will be better than that. I respect Elko a lot, and I wish the best for Cullen Klein. Like, I'm not a K-State fan here who is going to take pleasure in the pain of Cullen Klein at all there. In fact, I mean, you can argue if you're wanting him to come back as a head coach someday, maybe you don't want him to be too terribly good at Texas A&M, but you need him to not completely flame out there, right? If that's the ultimate idea. I don't hold a grudge against Cullen Klein for that. It was a career move that is understandable. But yes, I did see that. I also saw just a lot of Texas A&M Twitter very upset with the play calling, but everyone's flailing and mad at everybody when the offense looks that bad, especially in such a high profile spot. David, what's up, David? Oh, so David's going to enjoy this one. Speaking of pleasure in someone else's pain, David will enjoy it because, did Trevi Alberts and Texas A&M lose? Yes, David, Nebraska fan, lost Trev Alberts to Texas A&M. Weird move there, and then they lost. They lose a big spot in week 1. So, yes, congratulations, David. Egg on the face of Trev Alberts in week 1. Well, Nebraska looks like they found a quarterback. I hate to admit it, and I hate to tell you folks, I think Nebraska is going to be in a pretty good spot because Dylan Raiola looks like the real deal. That guy can sling it. I think Nebraska fans are going to be really, really happy with that. For a true freshman to go out there and hit some of the throws he did. Watch out, Colorado. Watch out. Nebraska favored for a reason in that one coming up this weekend. And Jeff, thank you for weighing in. Let me go see if there's something in the comments here that I'm missing. I'm not seeing anything. All right, well, Jeff, I appreciate your contribution to the channel. Thank you, my friend. And anybody else who wants to join in, click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. If we want to go a little deeper in this Penn State West Virginia game, because I know I was talking more like big picture on this, I do want to say, like, I truly feel for West Virginia fans here, because Friday was great. You did get that. You'll always have Friday. Pat McAfee show, the fan base really showing out. They deserved a better performance. I mean, Neil Brown basically said as much in the postgame press conference. Deserved a better performance in that big of a spot. Friday was fun, but when it came to the game, I always think about this, like the fun quotient for games. Was there a big moment? Even if it was a loss, was there a big moment? Was there something memorable, a cool experience? My example of this is always like when K-State was at the peak of its powers under Bill Snyder, winning 11 games, 6 of 7 years in the late 90s, early 2000s. They played a game against Oklahoma in 2000. College Game Day was there. K-State was number 2. They got down 38-17. Came all the way back to within 1 score. They had a block punt that got them to within 1 score in the fourth quarter, run back in for a touchdown. A lot of people will tell you, myself included, I was there. It was the loudest moment, I think, in Bill Snyder Family Stadium history. K-State lost the game, but there was at least a moment there that was really fun and a cool experience for everybody. Man, there was nothing for West Virginia fans in that game. Maybe the closest thing you're getting is probably the Drew Aller fumble in the first quarter, but guess what happened right after it? West Virginia threw it right back with a mistake with the snap hitting the motion man. So there was just no moment to really be like a cathartic, let it all out, scream, it's an awesome moment, great. There was none of that. And then you had like the worst case scenario, which is a weather delay being thrown in there too. So you don't get your moment. You get, I would say this was borderline crock potting. If again, I'm going to reference the solid verbal, kind of what it was. Like you're not just getting blitzed right out of the chute, right? This wasn't 2012 K-State, West Virginia, but this was like, it just simmers for a long time. You're never really getting anywhere. And by the end of it, like you are cooked all the way through, man. You're pretty damn well cooked. It's kind of what happened to West Virginia in this game, which is just not fun. It's like slowly having the life squeezed out of you. There was some controversy. Yes, there were some calls, I think, that did not go West Virginia's way. So you endure all of that and you watch Drew Aller, who there's been all this talk about Aller and Garrett Green. And like, I'm sitting here like kind of defending West Virginia and saying, I don't think Drew Aller is that great of a quarterback. And Aller looked awesome. And completely cooked in the second quarter with 3 touchdown passes. That moment right before halftime was a huge piece of the game. And then you get a weather delay, which is just the most deflating thing ever. Kills the atmosphere because inevitably some people are going to leave. There's a 2+ hour lightning delay. Some people are not going to come back. So you get that element, the atmosphere sucked out. Instead of night game with no interruptions, you got 11 a.m. with a weather delay. Worst case scenario. And then by the time you come back, Penn State just gets back to scoring again. And it's just nothing there, man. Nothing there. That's a miserable day. So I really, truly do feel for West Virginia fans and all that. Drew Aller, I got to give him credit. And I've got to say that I feel a little bit silly because I knew better. I have been saying for years now, Andy Kotelnicki is a star, the Kansas offensive coordinator who really was co-pilot on that turnaround that Lance Leipold put together, who was amazing. I mean, I watched him in the Big 12. His offense there's so much pre-snap motion and eye candy and window dressing that it becomes really tough to stop. And he schemes guys open. I should have known. He goes to Penn State. He starts working with Drew Aller, who does have a lot of talent. Of course he was going to look great. Of course, because Kotelnicki is a star. If I were a Kansas fan, I would look around at that a little bit and be like, oh, okay, I'm not going to overreact, but I might plant a little seed in my head of like, oh, we may have really downgraded here at offensive coordinator. We'll see about Jeff Grimes. Again, I'm not taking anything from the Lindenwood game, but just Kotelnicki looks so good. The early returns there in a big test for he and his quarterback, who were much maligned last year. I mean, as for the controversy, one other note that I had on the West Virginia game here, like I know West Virginia fans, I thought that was a fumble. The other Penn State quarterback that was in there kind of fumbled it right as his shin was about to hit the ground. I did think that was a fumble. The touchdown right before half didn't get reviewed. It was probably offensive pass interference on the 55-yard pass that set that up. A lot of things that could have gone the other way. Now, I also thought West Virginia got away with one on a 4th down conversion that they got that held up a pass replay. But even if some of these calls went the other way, I didn't see anything in the game that indicated that was going to make any difference in the outcome. It was really Penn State really outclassed West Virginia, which is very, very disappointing. Season is far from over for the Mountaineers. Again, much like I did with the Tech fans, I will reiterate this for West Virginia. Season is far from over, but you got to get it put together quickly because there's a game against Albany, and then it's at Pitt, Kansas, at Oklahoma State, Iowa State, K-State, at Arizona. Gets real in a hurry. I guess it already got real, but it will continue to be very real. And if you don't start to figure things out, that could go downhill fast. But I think some pieces are there to still have a nice season for the Mountaineers, and you will not see a defense like that the rest of the way. All right, let's say hello to Lance. What's up, Lance? Lance, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your kind words. Lance says, love the show. Oklahoma State looked much better to begin the season. Need to quit giving up big plays on the back end. Gundy's teams only get better as the season goes on. Lance, that is a hell of a lot better looking game for Oklahoma State on Saturday than anything they did at the beginning of the year last year. You are correct. Now, it helps when you've actually got one quarterback that you're sticking to, which was definitely not the case at this time last year. That was one of the most impressive things to me. I mean, Alan Bowman had a big day and spreading the ball around. You knew Ollie Gordon would be good. He was. Yes, some big plays, but like South Dakota State also, they're a good team. Like that was, the spread on that game was 10 points for a reason. Like Oklahoma State took care of business, man. I think you have to be really, really pleased with that if you are a Pokes fan. So I was impressed. I mean, I said, to me, one of the big picture takeaways is Utah and Oklahoma State seem to be tier 1 of the Big 12 if we're just going to project out based on our preseason expectations combined with the data that we got in week 1. Winning a game by 24 points against a back-to-back FCS champ when you're favored by 10, that's good work. That is good work. I did find it interesting on the Oklahoma State front. I saw Kelly Ford, who again I love his rankings and his model, but Oklahoma State actually dropped 4 spots after that win. And so I did ask him, I was like, hey, I'm not attacking. I'm just curious here what's going on. I asked him today, like, why Oklahoma State dropped. And he said, look, the model's really volatile early in the year. And he said, according to the model, Oklahoma State actually did just very slightly underperform. And so many teams in the top 25, like, really overperformed. It was just a matter of other teams passing them. And it's nothing really against Oklahoma State and their performance. But I was still like, man, that's a tough crowd. That's a tough model if that's underperforming, because I thought Oklahoma State played very well. Certainly acquitted themselves very well. So, yeah, Lance, nothing that you saw on Saturday I think should be discouraging at all for any thoughts of Oklahoma State getting to the college football playoff or winning the Big 12. Like, that very much should confirm the thinking that they're a legit contender for that. So, happy for you, Lance. Happy for you. You and your Cowboys. Appreciate you. Thank you for being here. All right. Arizona defense definitely has work to do. They gave up almost 500 yards to New Mexico, but that offense is going to give them a chance, man. I mean, Tedero McMillan's a complete dude. Noah Fafita is a complete dude. I was just like looking at some of the reaction from folks like Jason Shear. I know he seemed to think that the defense's problems are correctable. We'll find out. He does not expect that to be a season-long problem. It was, we can say it was Brent Brennan's first game coaching in a new school that's also in a new conference this year, albeit I know it's a non-conference game, but you can expect probably some growing pains there. But both of those things catch your eye. It's just that was a box score game for Arizona, complete box score game on both sides, whether you're looking at what they did offensively or what they gave up. Just rolling through my emptying the notebook on Big 12 takeaways from week 1 here of the last couple minutes. And by the way, if you want to be a part of the show, it is buzzer beater time. Get those shots up. Click the $ below the chat box to do that if you want to contribute and make sure your question or comment gets on. I wasn't moved at all on Colorado watching that game on Thursday. That seemed about what I expected. That's a Colorado team that is going to be entertaining and fun. Travis Hunter is legitimately just a complete freak. And boy, we'll see on the Heisman thing and watch how all that plays out. I don't think Colorado is going to win enough games to like legitimately get him the Heisman Trophy. But if we're doing it based on just purely like skill and like who is the best quote unquote player out there and not just best player on a good team, I'd be hard pressed to go against Travis Hunter. But they give up a lot of big plays. The defense looks like it still needs work. I still have a lot of the same questions that I do with them. And that did not appear to me to be a team that looks ready to compete for a league title. It looked like a team that kind of like in that TCU sort of bracket that I was talking about earlier. Feels 6-6, 7-5, which is exactly what I said on Colorado at the beginning of the season. And they've got their work cut out for them with Nebraska. It will be very interesting to see how that Nebraska game goes, because like I said, Nebraska looked pretty good. And they've got a very, very good quarterback themselves in Dylan Raiola. That much seems clear. Speaking of quarterback play, 2 guys that definitely need to get the kinks worked out from Saturday would be Avery Johnson and KJ Jefferson. I know I was laughing at shout out to my guys at Sons of UCF. I was DMing with them a little bit and talking with them a little bit about the performance of KJ Jefferson, and like some UCF fans, I was looking in their Twitter mentions, were like already calling for the backup quarterback there and not real thrilled. And I saw a couple of the series in the first quarter. KJ Jefferson did not look very good at all. He missed a couple pretty open receivers. He had the ball slip out of his hand when he was rolling toward the flat, looked like was about to throw the ball into the flat. So it was definitely shaky. Definitely shaky for KJ Jefferson, even though the game wound up being no problem at all for UCF. UCF backfield is great, but KJ Jefferson, work in progress. It would certainly appear for the Knights. And, same for Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson's stat line is not terrible, It was not like a dominant performance of the year. K-State won 41-6 over a top 25 FCS team. Like the game's fine. Avery Johnson, 14 of 21, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but definitely seemed to be a guy who was locking into one read for a lot of the game. I saw that game from the press box in Manhattan, and I did feel like at times there were guys that were open that he was just not seeing. Which I would rather have that problem than, hey, nobody's getting open, because that's one that has felt like K-State's had at times over the last 10 years, is just not having a good enough receiving core. But he's a true sophomore that was starting his second game. I think there are going to be some growing pains with that, and we saw some of that on Saturday for K-State with Avery Johnson. The good news, if you're a Wildcat fan, is that the defense looked really good. K-State's defense looked awesome. They were flying around everywhere. And the only times that they gave up points were after an Avery Johnson interception and after a fumbled kickoff return. So the defense did its part and then some. And that was the word out of camp, is that they felt great about that defense. It looked great. A lot of guys flying around all over the place, making plays. And then I already said it, like Cincy, Arizona State, BYU, Baylor, bottom 4 of the Big 12, really, really made it would appear nice strides, and just had very encouraging performances for their fan bases, I would say. Very, very encouraging performances there. Guys, we don't need to fight about Iowa. We don't need to fight about Iowa in the comments. Look, Jeremy, you are right. This is a Big 12 based channel, but I am trying to talk about the full scope of college football here as much as possible. We're not going to be a show that is dictated by the biggest brands all of the time, but we can talk about Timothy saying that Iowa had 3 passing touchdowns. That is new. That is newsworthy for Iowa to do that. It bears mentioning. I will say, though, Timothy, it happened when Kirk Ferentz wasn't there. I'm just saying it happened when Kirk Ferentz wasn't there. So maybe we have discovered the Iowa offense problem. Maybe we have actually discovered the Iowa offense problem. Jeremy says he's not seeing the Avery Johnson magic at all. Well, if you watch him run, I mean, he had a couple of moments. He had one. It was only like a 6-yard gain, but he's getting pressured and comes up the middle and then darts out left. And it literally just looks like a video game when you hit the speed burst button and they're just like cruising. And it almost looks like this is kind of unfair. The video game's being a little wonky. Like, I mean, he still has some pretty special moments like that. He did throw one pretty nice deep ball. He's got the traits and he's got arm talent. I think right now it appears to me like it's going to be a slowing the game down, going through your reads sort of thing. How long will that take for the adjustment to happen? I don't know. But yeah, I think some people probably did put the cart in front of the horse with the hype machine for that this year. But I also still think he's going to be a very good quarterback and will still be a very good quarterback this year. Yeah, I think that's about it. Unless anybody has a real buzzer beater here at the very end, I think that's about it in terms of week 1 reaction to what happened. I know somebody said earlier I was rubbing it in too much on West Virginia fans. I was not intending to rub it in for West Virginia fans. I was intending to show that I understand how awful that must have been on Saturday, and I have empathy and sympathy for you. I have been there before, but also I have sympathy for you seeing how that worked out. So I appreciate all of you guys. Thank you for being here. Make sure to subscribe to the Open for Business newsletter. If you are a Big 12 fan, you want to be the smartest Big 12 fan in your group chat, you want to bypass all the Big 10 and SEC news, just get your Big 12 news. Go to ofbnews.com to subscribe to the newsletter. You can also just click the link that's in the description of the video. 2 very easy ways to do that. I will have a newsletter going out late tomorrow. So you'll get even more reaction from week 1 of the Big 12 there. Yes, I'm seeing the update from Ron on the LSU USC game. I do want to go watch little LSU USC, see the rest of that. Hope that you guys had a wonderful week 1 on Saturday and have a great rest of your Labor Day weekend. Like the video on your way out the door. Spread the word about the channel and the newsletter to all your friends and family, social media, word of mouth, wherever you are at. And I will talk to you all very soon. Take care.